The Yes Vengeance continued to power up its systems as Captain Morrison watched the three Zelonian cruisers on his tactical display. The alien ships were maintaining their positions around his vessel, but their weapon systems were fully charged and ready for combat. Morrison had been in this situation before with other alien species, and he knew exactly how it would play out. Athena, analysis of the alien vessels. Morrison commanded quietly. The ship's artificial intelligence responded in a calm female voice that filled the bridge. Analysis complete, Captain. The three Selonian cruisers are armed with plasma-based energy weapons and kinetic projectile systems. Their defensive capabilities include energy shields and armored hulls. Estimated combat effectiveness is approximately 12% of our current capability, Morrison nodded. Athena had been running tactical analysis on the alien ships since they first appeared, calculating firing solutions and defensive strategies. The AI had determined that the three Zelonian cruisers posed minimal threat to the Vengeance, despite their larger size. Recommended response? Morrison asked. Standard diplomatic protocol suggests a warning transmission before taking defensive action. However, the aliens have committed an act of military espionage by conducting unauthorized deep scans of our vessel. Lieutenant Commander Ben Carter looked up from his weapons station. Captain, all weapon systems are online and ready. Athena has targeting solutions for all three alien vessels. Morrison made his decision. It was time to end this standoff before it escalated into something more dangerous. He activated the communication system and began what would become one of the most important transmissions in galactic history. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force destroyer HMS Vengeance. You have been conducting unauthorized scans of my vessel for the past hour. This constitutes an act of espionage under interstellar law. You have 30 seconds to withdraw beyond weapons range, or we will interpret your actions as hostile. On. The Zelonian flagship, Commander Vexthal, received the transmission with growing alarm. The human captain's voice was calm and professional, but there was an underlying tone of absolute confidence that sent chills down his spine. This was not the voice of someone who felt threatened by three enemy cruisers. Commander, the human ship has full power, Sensor Officer Zilkin reported. Their weapon systems are online and they have targeting locks on all three of our vessels. Vexthal studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human ship was much smaller than his cruisers, but everything they had learned during the scanning suggested that size was not an indication of combat capability. The humans had apparently mastered technologies that made their smaller ships incredibly dangerous. How did they achieve targeting locks so quickly? He asked. Unknown, Commander. Their targeting systems appear to be far more sophisticated than anything we have encountered. They locked onto our vessels within seconds of powering up their weapons. Science. Officer Kylemoff looked up from his station with obvious fear in his eyes. Commander, based on what we learned during the scan, I strongly recommend immediate withdrawal. This vessel is far more dangerous than we initially assessed. Vexthal considered his options. The smart tactical decision would be to withdraw and report what they had learned to the High Command. But retreating from a single human destroyer would be a humiliation that could end his career. The other option was to call the human captain's bluff and see if he was really willing to engage three Zelonian cruisers. Time remaining? He asked. 15 seconds, Commander. The countdown continued as Vexthal wrestled with his decision. Everything his military training told him suggested that three cruisers should be able to defeat one destroyer, regardless of technological advantages. But the scanning had revealed capabilities that challenged everything he thought he knew about. Space combat. 10 seconds, Commander. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Morrison watched the alien ships with calm patience. He had given them fair warning, and now it was up to them to decide whether they wanted to learn about human military capabilities the easy way or the hard way. Captain, the aliens are not withdrawing, Lieutenant Blake reported. 5 seconds remaining, Morrison sighed. Athena, disable the alien vessels. Minimum force necessary. The artificial intelligence responded instantly, acknowledged Captain. Implementing non-lethal suppression pattern. What happened next took less than 3 seconds but would be remembered by the Zelonian survivors for the rest of their lives. The HMS Vengeance fired a precise pattern of kinetic projectiles that struck each alien cruiser with surgical accuracy. The projectiles were not designed to destroy the ships, but to disable their weapon systems and engines. The first cruiser took hits to its main weapon batteries, rendering them inoperative in seconds. The second cruiser lost its engine systems. When kinetic rounds penetrated its hull and severed critical power conduits, the third cruiser, Vextal S flagship, suffered damage to both weapons and propulsion systems, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. On the Zelonian flagship, the bridge was filled with smoke and sparks as damaged systems failed throughout the ship. Commander Vextal picked himself up from the deck where the impact had thrown him, staring in shock at the devastation around him. "Damage report," he called out. "Main weapons offline," Zilkin reported from his damaged console. "Engines inoperative. Life support functioning but several hull breaches detected." The precision of the attack was terrifying. The humans had disabled 3 cruisers in seconds without destroying them or causing significant casualties. It demonstrated a level of tactical capability and weapon accuracy that was beyond anything the Zelonians had imagined possible. "Commander, incoming transmission from the human vessel," the communications officer announced. Morrison's voice filled the Zelonian bridge again, still calm and professional. "Commander Vextal, your vessels have been disabled as a defensive measure. You are free to conduct repairs and withdraw from this area. Consider this a demonstration of what happens when you scan human military vessels without permission." Vextal realized that the human captain knew his name, which meant their AI had penetrated Zelonian security systems during the brief engagement. The demonstration of power was complete and devastating. "We will withdraw immediately," Vextal transmitted back, his voice shaking slightly. "Understood, Commander. Safe travels." As the Zelonian crews worked frantically to repair their damaged systems, the HMS Vengeance powered down its weapons and resumed its patrol course. For Captain Morrison and his crew, it had been a minor incident that would be noted in their log and forgotten. For the Zelonians, it was a lesson in humility that would reshape their entire military doctrine. 3 hours later, the Zelonian ships limped away from the encounter, their crews silent and shaken. Commander Vextal began composing his report to the High Command, knowing that his words would change the course of Zelonian policy forever. His recommendation was simple: avoid human space at all costs. The scan had revealed a species that did not just fight wars but had perfected them through millennia of conflict. The humans were apex predators in the realm of warfare, and the Zelonian Empire was not prepared to face such an enemy. Back on Earth, Admiral Patricia Hayes received Morrison's report with interest but not surprise. The encounter with the Zelonians was noted and filed away. The Earth Defense Force had more pressing concerns, including the ongoing conflict with the Centauri Republic and preparations for the expected Rigel Sector offensive. The HMS Vengeance continued its patrol, disappearing into hyperspace as Lieutenant Sam Walker logged the encounter as a routine diplomatic incident. For humanity, it had been just another day in their long history of warfare and survival. For the Zelonians, it was the day they learned that some sleeping giants are better left undisturbed. The scanning continued as Science Officer Kyle Muff delved deeper into the human vessel's database. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The records revealed a species that had turned warfare into an art form, a science, so refined that their military doctrine assumed enemies with identical capabilities and intelligence. "Commander, the tactical files are extensive," Kylmuth reported, his voice shaking slightly. "The humans have documented over 3,000 years of continuous warfare. Not wars against alien species, but conflicts between human factions." "Commander." Vextal studied the data streams with growing dread. The files showed battle reports, casualty statistics, and weapon specifications that made Zelonian military technology look like primitive tools. "Show me their most recent conflicts." The display changed to show records from what humans called the Outer Colony Wars. The documentation was clinical and precise, describing battles fought with weapons that could crack continents and strategies that treated the destruction of entire worlds as acceptable tactical losses. This conflict lasted 47 years, Kylmuth explained. The human factions involved deployed over 50,000 warships. The casualty count is in the billions. Vexthel felt his scaled skin grow cold. The entire Zelonian fleet consisted of less than 2,000 ships, and they had never fought a war that lasted more than a few years. The idea of a conflict spanning decades with tens of thousands of warships was beyond his comprehension. What were they fighting over? He asked. Resources, territory, political control, the same things all species fight over. But the scale is unprecedented. They fought battles in deep space with fleets numbering in the hundreds of ships. They developed tactics for fighting in asteroid fields, planetary atmospheres, and even inside gas giant atmospheres. The tactical sophistication was staggering. Zelonian battle doctrine was based on straightforward ship-to-ship combat in open space. The humans had apparently developed strategies for fighting in every conceivable environment, against enemies who knew exactly what to expect from human tactics. On the bridge of the HMS Vengeance, Dr. Amy Rodriguez monitored the alien scanning activity from her engineering station. Rodriguez was the ship's chief engineer and had served on human warships for over 15 years. She understood exactly what the aliens were discovering, and she could predict their reaction. Captain, they are accessing our historical combat records, she reported quietly. They are learning about the colony wars and the Centauri conflict. Captain Morrison nodded grimly. The aliens were about to understand what it meant to fight against a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. Every human warship was designed with the assumption that it would face enemies with identical technology and superior numbers. How long before they realize this is just a destroyer? Morrison asked. Rodriguez checked her displays. Based on their scanning pattern, they should find the ship classification data in the next few minutes. Morrison allowed himself a slight smile. The aliens were about to learn that the HMS Vengeance was not even a frontline combat vessel. It was a destroyer designed for reconnaissance and harassment missions. The real shock would come when they discovered what human battleships were capable of. Back on the Zelonian flagship, Kylmuth was studying the human ship's design specifications with growing horror. The vessel was incredibly sophisticated, but there were references to much larger and more powerful ships in the database. Commander, this vessel is classified as a destroyer according to their military hierarchy, he reported. It appears to be one of their smaller warships. Vexthel turned to stare at the science officer. Smaller? This ship is more advanced than anything in our fleet. Yes, Commander. The database contains references to cruisers, battleships, carriers, and something called dreadnoughts. The power output specifications for these larger vessels are enormous. The implications were terrifying. If a human destroyer was this advanced, what were their capital ships capable of? The thought of encountering a human battleship was enough to make Vexthel consider ordering an immediate retreat. Show me the specifications for their battleships, he ordered. Though he dreaded what he might see, the display changed to show technical data for human battleships. The numbers were staggering. The ships were over 2 kilometers long, carried antimatter reactors that could power entire cities, and mounted weapons that could destroy moons. The crew complements were in the thousands, and each ship carried enough firepower to eliminate entire fleets. These specifications cannot be accurate, Vexthel said, though his voice lacked conviction. The data appears to be consistent, Commander. The human military doctrine assumes battles against fleets of similar vessels. Their battleships are designed to fight other battleships in massive fleet engagements. Kylmuth switched to another file, showing battle reports from the Centauri War. The scale of the conflicts was beyond anything the Zelonians had ever imagined. Single battles involved hundreds of ships and lasted for weeks. The casualties were measured in millions, and the destruction was calculated in destroyed solar systems. Commander, there is something else, Kylmuth announced, his voice barely above a whisper. They have weapons called planet crackers, What do those do? According to these specifications, they are designed to destroy entire worlds. The weapons use focused antimatter beams to destabilize planetary cores. The documentation suggests they have used these weapons at least 12 times in recorded history. Vexthal felt his legs go weak. The humans had weapons that could destroy planets, and they had actually used them in warfare. The Zelonians had never even conceived of such devastating firepower, let alone built weapons capable of planetary destruction. How many of these weapons do they have? The database is incomplete, but it references at least 47 planet crackers in active service. They appear to be mounted on specialized vessels called world killers. The strategic implications were overwhelming. A species that could destroy entire worlds held the ultimate military advantage. No enemy could risk direct confrontation with an opponent capable of eliminating their homeworld with a single weapon. "Commander, I am detecting movement on the human vessel," Sensor Officer Zilkin announced suddenly. "Their power systems are coming online." Vexthal turned to the tactical display, where the human ship was beginning to show signs of activity. Energy readings were climbing rapidly, and weapon systems were powering up with frightening speed. "They know we have been scanning them," he realized. "Prepare for defensive action." "Commander, should we withdraw?" Zilkin asked, his voice showing the fear that all of them were feeling. Vexthal studied the tactical situation. 3 Zelonian cruisers against 1 human destroyer. Under normal circumstances, it would be an easy victory. But these were not normal circumstances. The human ship was more advanced than anything they had ever encountered, and it was crewed by representatives of a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of interstellar warfare. "Not yet," he decided, "but be ready to retreat at my command." The human ship's power readings continued to climb, and weapon systems that had appeared dormant were now showing active targeting solutions. The vengeance was waking up, and the Zelonians were about to learn what it meant to face a human warship in combat. The deep scan continued for another 10 minutes, and with each passing moment, Science Officer Kylemuth's expression grew more troubled. The human vessel was revealing secrets that challenged everything the Zelonians thought they knew about human technology and military doctrine. Commander Vexthal watched the data streams with growing alarm as layer after layer of sophisticated systems were exposed. "Commander, I am detecting something that should not be possible," Kylemuth announced, his voice carrying a note of genuine fear. "The artificial intelligence system aboard this vessel is far more advanced than anything we have ever encountered." Vexthal moved closer to the science station, studying the complex data patterns flowing across the displays. "How advanced are we talking about?" "The processing power is beyond our ability to measure accurately. The AI appears to be capable of running millions of calculations simultaneously while maintaining perfect accuracy in each computation. Our own quantum computers would be unable to match even a fraction of this processing capability." The implications were staggering. The Zelonians had always maintained technological superiority through their advanced computer systems. Their quantum processors were the most powerful in known space, capable of managing entire fleets and coordinating complex battle strategies. If the humans had developed AI systems that made Zelonian computers look primitive, it represented a fundamental shift in the balance of power. "What is the AI controlling?" Vexthal asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Everything, Commander. The AI appears to be integrated into every system on the ship. Weapons, navigation, life support, damage control, tactical analysis. All of it is managed by this single artificial intelligence. The efficiency is remarkable." On the bridge of the HMS Vengeance, Lieutenant Commander Ben Carter monitored the alien scanning activity from his weapons control station. Carter was a veteran of 12 major engagements and had seen what happened when enemies underestimated human military capabilities. The Zelonians were about to learn a lesson that many alien species had learned the hard way. "Captain, they are scanning our AI core," Carter reported quietly. "Athena is allowing them to see her basic processing capabilities, but she is keeping her combat subroutines hidden." Captain Morrison nodded. Athena was the ship's artificial intelligence, named after the ancient Greek goddess of wisdom and warfare. The AI was capable of managing every aspect of the ship's operations while simultaneously running tactical analysis on thousands of potential combat scenarios. What the Zelonians were seeing was only the tip of the iceberg. How much longer until they discover the manufacturing bay? Morrison asked. Based on their current scanning pattern, approximately 3 minutes, Carter replied. Morrison smiled grimly. The manufacturing bay was going to be the real surprise. Human military doctrine had learned long ago that ships needed to be self-sufficient during extended operations. The Vengeance carried a complete manufacturing facility capable of producing ammunition, replacement parts, and even entire weapon systems from raw materials back on the Zelonian flagship. The deep scan was revealing yet another impossible technology. Kalmuth was studying the readings from what appeared to be a manufacturing facility deep within the human vessel's hull. The size and complexity of the installation was beyond anything he had ever seen on a warship. Commander, the humans appear to have built a complete manufacturing facility inside this vessel, he reported, his voice filled with disbelief. The facility appears to be capable of producing complex machinery and weapon systems. Vexthal stared at the data in shock. Are you saying this ship can manufacture its own weapons? Yes, Commander. The facility appears to be designed for rapid production of ammunition, replacement parts, and even complete weapon systems. The ship could theoretically maintain itself indefinitely without returning to a base for resupply. The concept was revolutionary. Zelonian warships required regular resupply missions to maintain their combat effectiveness. Extended operations far from base were limited by ammunition and spare parts. A ship that could manufacture its own supplies would have enormous strategic advantages. How is this possible? Vexthal asked. The power requirements alone should be enormous. The antimatter reactor provides more than enough power, Commander. The manufacturing systems appear to be highly automated and incredibly efficient. The entire process is managed by the artificial intelligence we detected earlier. The picture that was emerging was of a weapon system designed by a species that understood warfare on a level the Zelonians had never imagined. Every aspect of the human vessel was optimized for combat effectiveness and operational independence. It was a predator designed to hunt and kill other warships. What about the crew quarters? Vexthal asked, hoping to find some sign of normal. Living spaces. The crew accommodations are minimal, Commander. The humans appear to have sacrificed comfort for combat effectiveness. The living spaces are extremely efficient, designed to support the crew for extended periods with minimal resources. How extended? Kalmuth ran calculations on his display. Based on the life support systems and resource recycling capabilities, the ship could sustain its crew for approximately 5 years without resupply. 5 years. The Zelonians were used to thinking in terms of weeks or months for extended operations. A ship that could operate independently for years would be almost impossible to defeat through conventional means. It could strike at targets deep within enemy territory and continue operating long after its supply lines had been cut. Commander, I am detecting something else, Kalmuth announced, his voice now carrying obvious fear. The vessel's databanks contain tactical information about human military conflicts. Show me. The display changed to show data files that had been recovered from the human ship's computer systems. The files contained detailed information about human military history, including records of conflicts that made Zelonian warfare look like children's games. These records describe wars fought with weapons that dwarf anything in our arsenal, Kalmuth reported. The humans have fought conflicts where entire star systems were rendered uninhabitable. They have weapons capable of destroying planets, and strategies that treat massive civilian casualties as acceptable losses. Vexthal studied the records with growing horror. The humans had apparently spent centuries fighting wars against opponents with identical technology and capabilities. Every advancement in human defensive technology had been matched by corresponding advances in offensive capabilities. It was an evolutionary arms race that had produced a species perfectly adapted for interstellar warfare. These are records of conflicts between human factions, he realized. They have been fighting wars against themselves. Yes, Commander. The tactical sophistication is remarkable. They have developed strategies for fighting opponents who know exactly what to expect from human military doctrine. The implications were terrifying. While the Zelonians had maintained their empire by fighting primitive species with inferior technology, the humans had been locked in an evolutionary arms race with themselves. Every human warship was designed to fight and defeat other human warships. The HMS Vengeance was not just advanced, it was the product of centuries of warfare against equally advanced opponents. Commander, there is more, Kylmuth continued. These records reference much larger vessels. This ship is classified as a destroyer, one of their smaller warships. The files contain design specifications for battleships, carriers, and something called planet crackers. Vexthel felt his blood run cold. If this destroyer was one of their smaller vessels, what were the larger ships capable of? The thought of encountering a human battleship was suddenly terrifying beyond imagination. The Zelonian deep penetration scanners came online with a low hum that vibrated through the hull of the flagship. Commander Vexthel watched as his science team began their detailed analysis of the human vessel. The scanners were powerful enough to map the internal structure of a ship down to individual components, revealing everything from weapon systems to crew quarters, science. Officer Kylmuth worked at his station with practiced efficiency, his clawed hands moving across the controls as streams of data began flowing across his displays. The deep scan would take several minutes to complete, but already the initial results were causing him to frown in confusion. Commander, I am detecting some unusual readings from the human vessel, Kylmuth reported, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that was rare for the experienced scientist. Vexthel moved closer to the science station, studying the data that was appearing on the screens. What kind of unusual readings? The hull structure is not what we expected. Our initial scans suggested standard metallic construction, but the deep penetration scan is revealing something far more complex. The hull appears to be composed of multiple layers, each with different properties. The commander leaned forward, his scaled features showing interest. Explain. Kylmuth pointed to a section of the display where a three-dimensional model of the human ship was slowly building as the scans continued. See here, Commander. The outer hull layer appears to be a standard titanium steel alloy, but beneath that is something we have never encountered before. There are microscopic structures embedded throughout the hull material. Microscopic structures? Yes. Commander, they appear to be some kind of nanotechnology. Millions of tiny machines integrated directly into the hull plating. I am not certain what their purpose might be, but the level of sophistication is remarkable. Vexthel felt a slight chill run down his spine. Nanotechnology was theoretical for the Zelonians, something their scientists had discussed but never successfully implemented. If the humans had mastered this technology, it could explain how they had been able to resist Zelonian expansion efforts better than expected. Continue the scan, he ordered. I want to know everything about this vessel. On the bridge of the HMS Vengeance, Captain Morrison watched his sensor displays with growing concern. The alien scanning beams were penetrating deeper into his ship than any scan he had ever experienced. Lieutenant Blake was tracking the progress of the scan, her face pale with worry. Captain, they are conducting a Level 7 deep scan, she reported quietly. They will be able to map our internal systems completely. Morrison nodded grimly. A Level 7 scan was an act of espionage by any military standard. The Zelonians were clearly trying to steal human military secrets. The question was whether to break radio silence an object or to let them continue and see what they discovered. Let them scan, Morrison decided. But prepare to go to full power on my command. Blake looked surprised. Sir, if they complete the scan, they will know everything about our capabilities. No, Morrison replied with a slight smile. They will know everything we want them to know. Back on the Zelonian flagship, The deep scan was revealing more surprises. Kalmuth was studying the power readings from the human vessel with growing amazement. What he was seeing should have been impossible with the technology he knew humans possessed. "Commander, the power source is not what we expected," he reported. "Our intelligence suggested that humans use primitive fusion reactors, but this is something entirely different." Vexthel moved to look over the scientist's shoulder. "What are you detecting?" "The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. The power output is enormous, far beyond what should be possible from a reactor small enough to fit in a ship of this size. The containment system appears to be using magnetic fields of incredible strength and precision. Could it be an antimatter reactor?" Kalmuth shook his head. "The signature is consistent with antimatter annihilation, but the containment system is far more advanced than anything we have ever seen. Antimatter reactors require massive magnetic containment systems, but this reactor appears to be using some kind of miniaturized technology that we do not understand." The implications were staggering. Antimatter reactors were the most efficient power source known to science, but they were also incredibly dangerous and required enormous containment systems. The fact that humans had apparently miniaturized this technology suggested a level of engineering sophistication that far exceeded Zelonian capabilities. "What about weapon systems?" Vexthel asked, hoping for better news. Kalmuth switched to a different display, showing the internal structure of the human vessel. "The weapon systems are unusual, Commander. They appear to be kinetic projectile weapons, but the design is unlike anything we have encountered." "Kinetic weapons? Those are primitive." "Not these, Commander. The magnetic acceleration systems are incredibly powerful. According to these readings, these weapons can accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The targeting systems are also remarkable. They appear to be capable of tracking and engaging multiple targets simultaneously with perfect accuracy." Vexthel studied the weapons data with growing unease. Kinetic weapons were indeed primitive, but only when they were slow. A projectile moving at even 1% of light speed would carry enough energy to destroy a cruiser with a single hit. The fact that the human ship could apparently fire such projectiles with perfect accuracy made it incredibly dangerous. "How many weapons does the vessel carry?" "That is another surprise, Commander. The ship appears to have been designed as a dedicated weapons platform. Nearly 60% of the internal volume is devoted to weapon systems, ammunition storage, and targeting equipment." The scan was revealing a picture that made Vexthel increasingly uncomfortable. This was not the primitive human vessel he had expected. The technology was advanced, the weapons were deadly, and the power systems were beyond anything the Zelonians had achieved. "What about crew quarters?" he asked, hoping to find some sign of normal ship design. "Minimal, Commander. The ship appears to be designed for a crew of approximately 200, but the living spaces are extremely compact. Most of the ship is devoted to combat systems. 200 crew members to operate a ship this size? The scan is revealing extensive automation systems, Commander. The ship appears to be controlled by some kind of artificial intelligence network. The computer systems are incredibly sophisticated, far beyond anything we have in our own fleet." Vexthel felt the chill in his spine growing stronger. An AI-controlled warship with antimatter power and light speed. Kinetic weapons was not something he wanted to encounter in combat. The human vessel was beginning to look less like a helpless target, and more like a sleeping predator. "Continue the scan," he ordered. Though he was beginning to suspect he might not like what they found next, the deep penetration scanners continued their work, peeling back layer after layer of the human vessel's secrets. With each new discovery, the Zelonians were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake in underestimating humanity's military capabilities. The cold void of space stretched endlessly in all directions as the Zelonian patrol fleet moved through the contested border region between human and Zelonian space. 3 massive cruisers cut through the darkness like predators hunting for prey. Each ship was nearly a kilometer long and bristled with weapon systems that had kept the Zelonian Empire dominant in this sector for over 2,000 years. "Commander," Vexthel stood on the bridge of the lead cruiser, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he studied the tactical display. The Zelonians were a proud warrior race, evolved from reptilian ancestors on a harsh desert world. Their empire spanned 47 star systems, and they had never met a species that could match their military might. Humans were just the latest in a long line of primitive species that had dared to expand into what the Zelonians considered their rightful territory. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, their movements precise and efficient. These were seasoned warriors who had fought in dozens of campaigns against various alien races. They knew their ships were superior, their weapons more advanced, and their tactics proven in countless battles. The humans had only been in space for a few centuries, barely enough time to develop proper faster-than-light travel, let alone build a military that could challenge the Zelonian Empire. Sensor Officer Zilkin suddenly straightened at his console, his reptilian features showing surprise. "Commander, we have detected a vessel approximately 3 million kilometers ahead. It appears to be human in origin." Vexthel moved to the sensor station, his clawed feet clicking against the metal deck plating. "Show me," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led fleets into battle for over 30 years. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying a long-range scan of the detected vessel. The ship was significantly smaller than the Zelonian cruisers, perhaps 300 meters in length. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with angular lines that suggested function over form. It appeared to be drifting without power, showing no signs of active sensors or communications. "Vessel classification?" Vexthel asked, studying the unfamiliar design. "Unknown, Commander. The configuration does not match any human ships in our database. It appears to be a military vessel based on the hull design and what we can detect of its weapon systems." Vexthel's scaled lips curved into something resembling a smile. This was an unexpected opportunity. The High Council had been pressuring fleet commanders to gather more intelligence on human military capabilities. So far, encounters with human vessels had been limited to brief skirmishes with their merchant ships and small patrol craft. This appeared to be something more substantial. "Any signs of life aboard the vessel?" he asked. Zilkin ran another scan, his clawed fingers dancing across the control interface. "Difficult to determine at this range, Commander. The hull appears to be constructed from materials that interfere with our standard bioscanners. However, there are no active energy signatures that would indicate powered systems." The commander considered his options. The ship could be a trap, though he doubted the humans possessed the tactical sophistication to set effective ambush. More likely, it was a damaged vessel that had been forced to shut down its systems to conserve power. Either way, it represented a valuable intelligence opportunity. "Bring us closer," Vexthel ordered, "but maintain defensive formation. I want all weapon systems online and ready." The 3 Zelonian cruisers moved forward, their massive hulls casting shadows across the smaller human vessel as they approached. The lead cruiser took position directly above the human ship, while the other 2 moved to flank it from either side. It was a standard tactical formation that had served the Zelonians well in countless engagements aboard the human vessel. Designated HMS Vengeance, Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly in his command chair, watching the alien ships approach on his tactical display. The bridge was dimly lit, running on minimal power to avoid detection. His crew of 200 had been maintaining radio silence for the past 6 hours, ever since their reconnaissance mission had gone sideways and they had been forced to withdraw into this remote region of space. Morrison was a career military officer who had served in the Earth Defense Force for over 20 years. He had fought in 3 major conflicts against various alien species and had learned to respect the capabilities of potential enemies. The Zelonians were known to be aggressive and technologically advanced, but they were also predictable in their tactics. Lieutenant Susan Blake, the ship's sensor officer, kept her voice low as she reported, "Captain, the alien vessels are moving into a standard encirclement formation. They're maintaining distance but have weapons powered and ready." Morrison nodded, his expression calm despite the dangerous situation. "Continue running silent. Let them make the first move." The Vengeance had been built according to human military doctrine, which assumed that any enemy would have similar technological capabilities and tactical knowledge. Every system on the ship was designed to fight and win against opponents who knew exactly what to expect from human vessels. The ship's true capabilities were hidden beneath layers of deception and misdirection. Back on the Zalonian flagship, Commander Vexthal studied the human vessel with growing interest. The ship was unlike anything in their intelligence files. The hull design was sleek and efficient, with none of the crude construction he had expected from a primitive species. More intriguing, their sensors were having difficulty penetrating the vessel's hull to determine its internal configuration. Science Officer Kylemoth, what can you tell me about this vessel? Vexthal asked. The elderly Zalonian scientist looked up from his instruments, his expression puzzled. Commander, the hull composition is unusual. It appears to be a composite material that we have not encountered before. Our standard sensors are having difficulty determining the ship's internal structure. Vexthal's interest was piqued. Are you saying the humans have developed sensor-resistant materials? It would appear so, Commander. The hull seems to be designed specifically to interfere with active scanning systems. This was unexpected. The Zalonians had always relied on their superior sensor technology to maintain tactical advantage in combat. If the humans had developed ways to counter their sensors, it could represent a significant shift in the balance of power. Continue scanning, Vexthal ordered. I want to know everything about this vessel. Use deep penetration sensors if necessary. Kylemoth hesitated. Commander, deep penetration scanning would certainly be detected by any active sensors aboard the human vessel. It could be interpreted as a hostile act. Vexthal considered this briefly. The human ship appeared to be powerless and helpless. Even if they detected the scans, what could they do against 3 Zalonian cruisers? Besides, the intelligence value of this opportunity was too great to pass up. Proceed with the deep scan, he commanded. I want to know what the humans are hiding. The decision would prove to be one that Commander Vexthal would regret for the rest of his life.